Hi guys, my name is Roger, and I'm building a mid-engine supercar in the basement of my home. Let's take a look at what I've been working on this week.
Well, welcome back to the channel, guys. I did not film making this part, but we do have a part, and I removed it from the mold this morning, and it looks good. I think it's usable. It has a few rough spots on it, like every part I make, but since we were painting these parts, it's nothing that a little putty and primer won't fix. So, part's looking good. Let me give you kind of an overview of it. I have it sitting up on some blocks. It is roughly the right height and position. You can see where the exhaust will go through here in this area. And then I haven't trimmed this out at all, so most of this area will be removed. There'll be a tiny flange around the edge to attach the aluminum insert that goes in it. And then the exhaust will come out over near the ends. And down here is for the license plate holder. And there's a lip up here for some lights to light the license plate. And it's roughly the right height with a deck lid. That should all line up and match up nicely once it's trimmed and put in the exact position. Again, all of this is just rough, it's close. Can't get any farther back from it, but I think you get the idea of kind of what it looks like. And I guess the next thing to do is to trim this part out. It's going to take some careful measuring. I'll have to trim. Now the sides are not critical, they're easy, they're just glue flanges. The bottom isn't super critical, I'll just remove the excess. And this is where the mesh panels will go into on both sides. And the rear diffuser will attach underneath here and go across and make that complete. The amount of flange I need to leave here is pretty critical, and the trim area across the top here is pretty critical. Now I left this piece long, so once I get this exactly like I want it and start fitting parts on the car, then I can come back and trim this to the correct length and sand it to match real nicely, so we'll have a good seam across there. But just wanted to show you this. Let me get busy trimming this out, and once it is all trimmed and sanded slightly, we will come back and take a look at it again. Okay, I have trimmed this piece out at least as well as I'm going to do it for right now. And let's take a look at what it looks like placed up on the car, where it should locate, and all of the edges. You can see, I guess first off, that I removed all of the excess around the edge. And you can see how it lines up here with the trunk. This should be one solid nice surface. And then this seam will be where the hatch splits and raises. You can see it aligns pretty nice. It's flush across here, all the way across. Now this piece is pretty flexible, and it will be until I have the other half of it, or the inner liner, made and glued to it. And once that's glued, it'll become very rigid. But that aligns and looks really nice. Kind of see it from the side here, it looks good. And everything is trimmed here for the edge to glue the next piece on, and we'll take a look at this again in a second. I also trimmed out this area here where the exhaust comes through. You can see it's setting up here. It's close. It's not exactly where the exhaust will sit, but it's pretty close. And then the aluminum insert will sit in this area. We'll have a mesh pattern cut in it for the air to come through. And it will have PEM studs pressed into the aluminum that will go through this flange around the edge. I'll have to drill holes where the PEM studs pass through and bolt onto here. Also, if you look in here, you can see I have some attachments on the back of these tubes on both sides. This is where the rear bumper support will attach. I'll weld something up out of steel. It'll bolt to a plate up against that, and it'll come out and stick just behind this. Probably be a steel tube that runs in just behind it without touching. Probably put some kind of foam insulation between that steel bumper and the carbon fiber panel, just so the panel is riding on the foam and not the steel, so there's no chance of touching it or rubbing and making a noise. It'll need some kind of a buffer or an insert. I think a foam would be great for that. But I did plan ahead for something there, and you can kind of see it does align. It should come straight out and right up against that, or just behind that, just before touching. When I know this distance, this part is not sitting exactly right. It could move in or out slightly. But once I start hanging body panels and know the exact dimension for that, then I can make that rear bumper support and welded it and mounted in place. I printed out the pattern. This is kind of what it'll look like when I cut the this mesh pattern in the aluminum piece. And I'm going to cut and tape all this together and make a pattern to test fit that the size is correct. I need to know how much offset from the edge for that to fit correctly and not interfere with the paint on the part. And then I'll have to start aligning the exhaust to match the holes in the opening, make sure that I can, and if I can't, then I may need to float those holes ever so slightly to get them to align perfect with the exhaust. But this is what that piece will look like. You can see the pattern it has cut in it for the air to come through the holes. And then I have some little separate pieces here just to test fit on the corners and make sure everything aligns and works great. Also, the next piece we're going to be making will attach here and wrap around the corner and go all the way over to the fender well arch. And it is the obviously the rear corner of the car, but it's where the light attaches also. This is a Ferrari 488 and 488 Pista tail light. I bought these direct from Ferrari, and it will mount here in this part. When this part is finished, I'll have to make two pieces, the part itself, and then there will be a bucket on the backside glued for this light to go in, and these fasteners to go through the back of the bucket and bolt in place and hold it to where it needs to go and locate. All right, and we have started making the mold for this next piece here. And once we make this mold and make a part and verify that it fits and works correctly, then we'll make the other side, which is just a mirrored pattern of the same part. But let's go take a look at that mold, the pieces that I've got cut so far. They are sitting here. And here are two pieces so far. I have the third piece glued up, sitting on the CNC. I'm going to start it cutting this morning, and then we'll just leave one piece. It is a 4-piece mold, and hopefully we can cut the 4th piece in the next day or two and start gluing all these together and start working and forming this mold, getting it ready to make a part on. This is a kind of complex shape mold. It's not going to be easy to do, but hopefully we can get it together and make it turn out a nice part. Don't see any reason we can. It's just going to have to be a little more precise than some of these larger flat parts. This has a lot of twists and turns to it, which will make life difficult, I'm sure. But hopefully we can make this turn out a nice part and move on to the next one. So let's go up to the CNC machine and take a look at the next mold that I'm getting ready to start cutting this morning. All right, here we are out at the CNC machine, and I have the next block of wood here glued up and loaded on the CNC, ready to cut. This will be the 3rd part of the mold that I just showed you in the basement. And I'm going to go ahead and load the G-code program in here and get this started cutting. It's a pretty small piece, so there's a good chance it may finish today, which would be great. And once this is finished, I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll check back in for an update. All right, well, I have some updates for you this morning. Part 3, which is here, came off of the CNC yesterday, finished, and I glued it to part 2 here, and let those dry overnight. I need to take this assembly and glue it to this part, which was part 1. And I'll get that glued up and clamped together here in just a few minutes and let that start drying. And then the last part, part 4, I have the block glued up here. It is ready to put on the CNC. You can see when I cut one of these up and glue it all together, it makes quite a mess. There is a lot of sawdust from both the circular saw here in the floor to cut blanks, and then the table saw to cut them down to exact size. But that is a full sheet of MDF, so it is sort of heavy. But we need to get that up on the CNC machine and get it cutting this morning. It will take most likely more than a full day, but we'll cut it all day long and see how far we get. And I've also been working on this template here for this aluminum insert. I removed the rear of the car, the rear valance, and made this printout on the laser printer, pieced it all together just to check the overall size, and it's not laying in exactly, it's curled up, but You can see there's a gap around the outside edge all the way around, which looks to me to be about the correct gap for it to fit in there and look and work correct. So I think the overall size is good. I need to shift the pattern up. For some reason it's all to the bottom side. It's not centered top and bottom, and it needs to be centered. I'll have to go in and manipulate that and shift it all. The exhaust tips don't line up with the holes either, but I have adjustment on those. I think I can shift them around and make them line up like they need to. I thought about moving the holes to match the exhaust where it is now, but I'm not sure which one I'm going to do yet. I'll either move the holes or move the exhaust. I'll work with that some more today and figure out which way I'm going to go, and figure out the hole placement where I need to put the PIM studs to bolt it into the plastic part. And I'm excited to see all of that because it's going to be some of the final trim pieces, and I'm curious as to how they're going to look on the car when it's finished, because however this looks and how, if it turns out nice and I like it, this will be the format that I follow for all the trim pieces on the car. You know, there are some aluminum pieces that go down here in these openings, and then there's some others on the car and other locations on the front end and just behind the front tires. So I want to see that that's going to look and work correctly, and then we can start working out the details for some of the other pieces on the car. But one thing at a time. Let me go get this part loaded on the CNC, get it cutting, since it will cut all day and possibly into tomorrow. I want to get that going, and then we will, when it's finished, we'll come back and I'll show you an update on what's been going on. Okay, so our fourth part of this mold is finished, which is down here on the bottom. The other three parts here I glued together, and I brushed a coat of glue on them. That's why it looks kind of yellow. That glue soaks into the wood and turns yellow, and it hardens and makes a good surface to work from. I need to glue this piece to this assembly, and I set this up here to see how everything aligned. It looks like it aligns good. Now there's a few pieces missing just because I wasn't able to do the full depth. 6 inches is the maximum I can cut on my machine, so I'll have to glue a block in here and work it down, and here and work it down, glue a block in here and kind of radius fillet that in. There's also one up here missing, a small one, and that won't be too bad. But this looks like it aligns really nice. It looks good, and it's not perfect. There's a little tiny bit of mismatch in both places, but it's very little. And then this overhangs. It's supposed to have an overhang. This is supposed to meet in the back here and align, which it almost does. It's really, really close. So I don't see any issues with this. I'm gonna go ahead and glue this together and brush a coat of glue on this half of the mold, or this fourth of the mold, and this will be ready to start working on trying to finish it, sanding and priming and puttying and all those fun things. But this is looking good. Let's take a look at something else that I machined today. I have the car covered up because I create so much dust. It gets extremely dirty. I keep it covered up like this, except when I need it uncovered to work on it, just to keep the dust off of it, because I create so much dust down here with a table saw and router and things I'm working with. But here on the back, I machined this out on the CNC just to test fit it and see what it would look like. Wanted to check the alignment with the holes here. These are the holes I'll have in the aluminum piece for the PIM studs, and I'll use this as a drill template. If the holes look like they're in the right place, I'll put this wood piece up here on this rear valance and transfer the holes into the valance. So when the aluminum piece is done, all those holes will be in it and aligned and ready to go. I need to put this part in here once I verify the holes are right, and bolt it on, and then start aligning the exhaust to the template. Right now I can't put the template on because the exhaust tips are not in the correct position. I'm also going to make some mounts. This is going to be hard to see, but I'm going to mount some pieces here on the sides that attach with at least 2 or 3 fasteners onto this frame for the tube. They'll come out and up and bolt onto the rear valance, where the rear valance and this side, the corner piece mount. The aluminum will come up and either bolt on the inside or outside of that joint, and all sandwiched together. And that will locate this rear valance in these corners. It'll give all that area strength, and that will be the permanent mounting attachments for this rear valance once I know exactly the location it needs to be. Maybe a couple of weeks before we know that, but But that's what I've worked out as far as mounting this. Was trying to come up with some good hard attach points, and that looks like that'll be perfect for this rear valance and these corners over here. But that gets you up to speed on what I've been working on the last couple of days. I just wanted you to see this. I'm going to go over here and glue this mold together and then start working on that. It's going to be several days finishing that, getting it ready to make a part on. All right, I've got a couple of little updates for you guys. Sanded on this mold for the better part of yesterday and some this morning, and the weather finally broke. It's been raining here for several days, and it finally turned out nice today, just in time for me to spray the first coat of primer on this. So I laid a pretty heavy coat on it. There was a few spots that it's hard to get to the sand that the primer will help fill in and build up some areas, and this looks pretty good. I can see a few spots that need a little bit of work, but they are small and easy to fix, and this is still very wet. I just brought it in. It'll take a couple of hours to dry completely, so you can see maybe some lighter and darker spots on it where it's starting to dry in spots maybe, but it's fairly slick. It looks okay. I will let this dry till tomorrow so it's completely dry, and I'll come back in and start doing my block sanding and try to get this out to where it looks like it's ready to make a part. And then once I think it's plenty smooth, we'll go ahead and put the second coat of high build primer on it and come back and wet sand that. I was originally planning on waiting until the part came off of this mold to make sure that the mold worked fine, there was no issues with it, before I started on the other half, the mirrored half of this, which would be the passenger side rear corner of the car. But after looking at the mold and deciding that it looked like it was going to be fairly straightforward, I figured out how I'm going to do my inlets and outlets for epoxy in and vacuum out. I don't see it being that difficult. The only bad part about this is because the lip that's all the way around to be able to put parts together, I'm going to have to destroy this mold to get the part out of the mold. I didn't want to do a two-piece mold. I've never done one before. I'm not quite sure how to put them together and get a nice clean seam, and to keep the seam from leaking, vacuum leaking, so it wouldn't create a nice part. So this is a 4-part mold, and I have one of those parts cutting on the CNC right now, which is this bottom half. It's 5 1/4 inches tall. It is currently cutting, so that's where the sawdust came from, and I need to sweep, but I can't sweep when I have a wet primer sitting here, so it's going to be probably tomorrow before I get to sweep and clean up. But I wanted to show you this. I cut this part out on the CNC. It is a complete part. I wanted to see what it looked like on the car, make sure it fit good, see how it steps in just enough all the way around to lay down in there flat, because there's a small radius at the bottom here. I moved the mufflers until they centered up in the holes on both sides. You can see I have a screw sitting here for a spacer, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's not exact, but it's probably within a 1/16 of an inch. I know I can get the mufflers perfectly centered if I spent more time on it, but there's no use to do that right now. Where all the clecos are, that'll be where PEM studs press in. Still haven't made up my mind if I'm going to use 440 or 632 PEM studs, but right now I'm thinking or leaning towards 440s, but I will make a decision on that soon. I also put the holes in here for the letters. I'm going to either 3D print or SLA, most likely SLA, the letters that say Phoenix, and those little holes are for pins on the letters for alignment. I will either heat stake those letters on with the pins on the back side, or use some kind of a thin double-sided tape, which is what most car manufacturers use now to apply name badges. So I may do that on the letters and just use the pins for alignment to make sure they all align and are nice and straight. But anyway, I want you to see this. I really like the pattern on it, but this will be cut out of 1/4 inch aluminum. I think I have the file or the pattern to where I'm happy with it, and we can go ahead and send this off to my friend who has the laser cutter and let him be working on this part sometime soon. But wanted you to see what this looks like. I'm pretty happy with that, and I think once the car is painted and this aluminum piece is anodized black, that'll look nice. Not sure what color I'll do the letters on the inside. The letters could be black, either a gloss or a flat black to accent this black panel to make them where they're just barely visible, or they could be painted orange like the rest of the car to where they really show up. Not sure. Actually, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you think more visible letters or less visible letters would look best? If you could leave me a comment down below in the comments section and let me know your opinion on that, that would be great, just to kind of get some feedback on what you guys' opinion is on that. But this looks pretty good. I'm really happy with this. This is looking nice. I'll be glad when this corner part is made and put on. This corner wraps all the way around, includes a tail light, and goes over to the rear tire and creates part of the fender well for that rear tire. So once that part is made and attached here, this should start looking really nice, and you can kind of see how wide and the shape of the rear of the car. And then the mold for the other side over here has started cutting, so it'll be a couple more weeks and we'll have that part also, and then we can have a full rear end assembly minus the rear diffuser, which I'm probably going to do that part next and go ahead and complete the rear of the car. Might as well. But that brings you guys up to speed. I just wanted to see what this looks like, and I'm going to get back to work on something else. So I had some free time today since it's a holiday, and I came down to my friend's who has the fiber laser, and this is the laser cutter. We have the piece of aluminum in the machine and two small parts here set up on the screen ready to cut. We're going to test these out and see how it cuts, and if all goes well, we'll cut the larger piece. But let's see how this works out and what it looks like. This is the first part we're going to make, just making sure the laser's set up correctly. This is my friend David, and this is his business, and we're going to cut the first test part here and see what happens.
Looks like it will clean up pretty good.
Yeah, it looks nice. That's part number one, so we have two more pieces to go. I'll show you what those look like when we're finished. I won't film the entire cut process. Well, here's what our parts look like. And we got a little bit of a shadow from a light on them, but you can see they turned out really nice. Need to Scotch Brite the edges, polish them up a little bit. So I'm going to take these home and place them on the car, and we'll see what they look like. Well, I'm back at home. I have the pieces that we cut out on the laser cutter today, and I've installed this one piece here in the center. I've replaced the wood piece that I cut on the CNC laying here in the floor with the aluminum piece that was cut today, and everything fits and looks nice. I think this will be a good looking part when everything is all said and done. I need to put the PIM studs in the part, which I have ordered. They should be here in 1 or 2 more days, and try to figure out how I'm going to finish this part. I have some options. I could anodize it, I could powder coat it, I might be able to black oxide it. I'm not sure if you can black oxide aluminum or not. You may only be able to do steel. I need to look into that. But I'll do some research and see which process I think will produce the best looking part. It's obviously going to be black. I'm not sure if it's going to be a gloss black or a semi-gloss or even a flat at this point, but one of the three. But this part looks good. The other two parts laying here in the floor are for the corner pieces that we're making now. They will go somewhere in this area. They're low down here at the bottom for air to escape these rear fender wells. Here's an overview of this. I think it looks good. Kind of back from a distance. I like the pattern on this part. I'm really happy with it. Everything is looking nice. I think that'll trim out and look really good as a final part on the car. Let's take a look over here. And believe it or not, I actually vacuumed the floor 2 days ago, but we've already made a mess again. Here is the first part or first piece of the next mold, which is a mirror image of this mold. The first part is finished. The second part is on the CNC cutting now. And I put the final coat of primer on this mold this morning. It is pretty slick. I need to wet sand this and we'll be ready to wax it and make a part. Today is it's Wednesday afternoon. I'm hoping to make a part either Saturday or Sunday off of this mold, and at the same time that we're finishing this part, I'm going to try to have this mold finished and possibly make a part on it the following weekend. If not, it should be ready in 2 weeks tops. So hopefully in the next video we'll have a part off of this mold and most likely a part off of this mold also. So we should have the entire rear end except the rear diffuser, and I can show you those parts. Now this mold is turned sideways, but this is where this part will go. Obviously on the other side, I'll cut out an opening here for this, and it'll come in from the back side and it goes in here. And this is an air vent, just so air can escape out of this rear fender well. You can see up here, this is where the tail light goes. That's what this part is looking like. It's got a nice reflection off of it everywhere. It's pretty slick. There's a couple of spots I couldn't get to with the primer that are not as slick, so I'll have to sand them a little more. Down inside this lip was hard to get. And over on the side here, it's a little bit rough. It's hard to get enough primer in there to get a good slick finish on that, so I'll have to wet sand that pretty heavily. But other than that, it looks really nice. But I guess that's going to be about it for this week's video. We made quite a bit of progress in this video, or at least I think so, more than usual. And hopefully things are starting to move a little bit faster, making these molds and getting these body panels made. But thanks for joining this week, and I guess that's all for this week. And I'll see you guys again in a few weeks.